going to take some time to talk a little bit about some of the challenges and opportunities of realizing this digitalization dream and vision. And I'm really excited to have Erin Autin up here on stage with me to help me co-moderate this panel. We figured we had 3 CEOs up here. We might need a couple of us to handle you all. So we hope to have a really dynamic conversation here, just talking about how do we really visualize and see through the organizations this transformation, and make sure everyone in the organization understands what's going on and is a part of it. So what we want to do first is go through and introduce each one of you. And we've been talking at this event about, how did you get into energy? How did you get involved in the space? So it'd be great to hear from each of you just a little bit about when did you realize that energy was for you? So Gil, it'd be great to hear a little bit from you first.
I started as an energy consultant to Con Edison, which is the utility in New York, and at the beginnings of energy efficiency back in the late 80s, part of integrated resource planning at the time. And I was then hired by Con Ed to run their program. So that's kind of how I got started. I then, through deregulation, founded one of the competitive businesses of Con Ed Solutions. And after 9/11, I joined Mayor Michael Bloomberg administration as his energy policy advisor as we were helping to rebuild New York City after 9/11. Okay. And then I went to the Power Authority. I've been there now for 10 years.
Okay, excellent. Well, thanks for joining us. Arlen with SMUD.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I guess I'm an accidental entry into the energy world. I'm a lawyer by training, so don't hold that against me. But I'm a recovering lawyer, so it's better. I actually came to SMUD as a lawyer when I'd been doing real estate development work and the market in California crashed. Mm-hmm. And so I took a job to work on licensing power plants because there was some overlap there. Planned to stay for just 3 to 4 years to get that done. Figured the real estate field would be back up in play and I could go back into working in commercial real estate. And by the time the 4 years had ended, I found it to be really interesting. Mm-hmm. And I had the opportunity to do a lot of different things, from working on customer programs to really focusing on the development of the energy markets in California. I kind of fell into managing the whole energy crisis in California for the utility, became chief counsel, and then about 4 years ago became the CEO. So it's a very interesting industry. I didn't think it would be when I started, but it kind of captured me. But it's nothing I ever planned for originally.
Yes, yeah. I did a presentation yesterday morning talking about people falling into energy and not realizing how cool it is until they got here. So, Joe, how about you?
I wanted to be a rock star, and that didn't work out. So
you're still you're a rock star.
So similar to Arlen, I wouldn't call it accidental, but I started as a field engineer for AEP in my hometown, and kind of immediately got a sense of what a great opportunity as an electrical engineer. How much technology was evolving even 35 years ago, how much it was already starting to transform the opportunities for the industry. And so slowly but surely recognized there's just a lifetime of opportunity in this industry for a lot of different people. As an engineer, that certainly resonated with me, but moved through a lot of different roles over time: engineering, customer service, back office functions, corporate functions, CIO for a while, operating company leadership, and in both gas and electric. So I've had a lifetime of experience, and it's all been great. It's just a great industry for so many different reasons and for so many different disciplines. And there's probably no more exciting time than what lies ahead of us right now. Yeah. So it's just an awesome place to be.
Yeah, excellent. I know, Erin, you have some questions you want to ask.
Yeah, so we're talking today about visions of digitalization, and we just heard from Gil a little bit about his. So Joe, I was wondering if you could talk to us about your vision of digitalization for your organization.
Sure, I'll build right off of what I just said. With that experience and having watched the industry evolve with technology, and I'll even go back to my prior life as a musician, you could see digitalization changing the music industry even 40 or 50 years ago. And so it kind of carried that theme throughout. But every phase of what we're doing, when you look at NiSource, and I'll just do a little bit of profile of who we are, 8,000 people serving 4 million customers across 7 states. 3.5 million of those customers are on the gas side of the business, 500,000 on the electric side. And for those customers, we also happen to be, for most of them, their gas provider as well. So that's a pretty special relationship when you provide, the total fuel equation for your customers, the total energy equation. And you can see the opportunity for digitalization across really 2 dimensions probably frame that. The customer relationship, and Gil just did a nice job of describing, I think you had it as your third area of focus. And everything about how we serve the customer is now being enabled and transformed through digitalization of the transactional experiences, but also of how they can make choices for interacting with the energy production system itself. And so that vision is certainly alive at NiSource, probably not quite as far along as what you've heard from some others, somewhat because of a 7-state jurisdictional overlay makes the pace at which we can move a bit different than a single jurisdiction. And then probably the more compelling opportunity is what digitalization can do to optimize processes, how those 8,000 people work together along with thousands of others who work with us every day to optimize processes, to get the right people with the right skills in the right place with the right material to serve the customer the way they want to be served. And that's not a trivial set of opportunities. That's a really complex set of opportunities that requires a vision for architecture, a vision for process excellence, and a lot of training and change management across those 8,000 people and others. And so we're working at it from both sides, the customer side as well as the internal digital optimization of the business. And it's exciting frontiers for all of that.
Great, thanks. And Arlen, could you talk to us a little bit about?
Sure. So I think, when I step back and think about where we are, it is, if you think about customer expectations, technology advancements, and big data, those are really driving the digital future for utilities, whether we want to go or not. So, your choice right now is, do you get on the bus or do you get under it? And most of us would rather drive the bus than be run over it. So I would say for SMUD, much like NIPA, our vision can be pretty much summed up with digital first from A to Z, which essentially means that digital is going to lead through all of our business operations going forward. For the customer, that means that the customer has to have digital access to all of their interactions with us in the channel of their choice. So it means we're really focused on customer segmentation, journey mapping, and developing customized products, services, and communications for our customers. For our employees and the work they do, it really is about driving productivity, enhanced profitability, and engagement for these employees. For our office workers, it means mobility, where you have the opportunity to work anywhere, at any time with any device. For our field folks, it's also all about mobility, and that's really about work management, scheduling, and providing them real-time access to information that will allow them to do their jobs more efficiently and safely in the field. It also means automating our back office operations wherever and whenever we can. And then finally, the corollary to what we're doing with our customers is working to make our grid and our generation fleet smarter to enhance things like asset management, resilience, resource planning, and situational awareness. It means integrating, especially in California, integrating and optimizing a whole lot more DERs that are interacting with our grid. And then finally, and this is like a day 2 or maybe day 3 activity, it really is about creating that transactional platform that allows for peer-to-peer engagement in the grid of the future. Now that's a ways off and a little future focused, but we're not there in all of this. It's a journey right now.
Yeah, so like you said, it's a ways off in the future. So Gil, thinking about that and the reality of today, how do you know that you're on the right track to get to these visions that you've laid out?
It's a very complex but also very exciting challenge. If you as Arlen mentioned, if you want digitization to be part of everything that you're doing. At NIPA, we actually created an office, a digital transformation office that reports directly to me, because a lot of the issues are cross-cutting, right? So you want to make sure that your architecture is consistent across your business units, your data governance is sound and consistent, as well as the way you develop your applications, and be able to drive that change, and change management is critical. So it really has to start from the inside and then out. So it's been an interesting journey for us. We've been probably about a couple of years into it now, and seeing a lot of things that we didn't even think about when we started the journey. So companies like us, utilities, we have to be more accepting or using of concept like design thinking, right? Like lean startup principles, failing fast, learning and iterating. Those are the kind of culture that is not normal to utilities, but now more and more we have to adapt. Otherwise, you can't do digitalization without adopting lean startup, design thinking type principles.
I love that question, because I think therein lies the core point of digitalization or anything we're doing. It's really a set of tools to deliver better customer service, better value for our customers. And we've defined the journey more from the customer perspective versus the architecture and because that'll continue to evolve. What we know today is likely to be very different even 2 or 3 years from now. I did a little look back experiment, and MIT publishes the top 10 hot technologies. And if you look back just 1 or 2 years, the things that were on the frontier 1 or 2 years ago are now mainstream. And so it's moving so fast that I think it's in our industry, when you build to last and you build long-term infrastructure, you have to be careful that you're future-proofing. So we've defined success by industry-leading customer experience, customer satisfaction, affordability, customer safety for our employees and public safety, which is always fundamental in this industry. And then a culture of continuous improvement, which is a little bit of what Gil's, I think, touching on, that you have to transform the way we think about opportunities from that's the way we've always done it to there's always a better way, and we have to relentlessly pursue the next opportunity to move customer experience, safety, affordability, reliability, all the things that are important to customers. So it starts and ends with customer, and if you can't pass that test, the technology really doesn't matter. It's all about serving people.
So I would say that very similar, that you've got to be able to measure your investments to make sure you're getting a return on these digital investments. So, and I think I try to look at some short-term metrics and then a longer-term view also to see if we're moving in the right direction. Because as you said, it really is about the journey. It's not about arriving, because you're going to have to adjust and shuffle your vision when the next big thing comes out. So when I look at the short-term metrics that we measure, we're really focused on a metric that we call value for what you pay, which is really focused on measuring customer loyalty. And that means we pay a lot of attention to customer segmentation, journey mapping, and customization around products and services. The other metric that we pay a lot of attention to is metrics around operational excellence to determine whether our digital investments are improving our productivity, lowering our costs, and improving service. And then the final one, which goes to the culture point, which I think is crucial, is we measure employee engagement to determine whether our digital investments are creating an engaged and productive workforce that is going to attract and retain that next, the employees we need to be successful going forward. Longer term, as we take this journey, I'm really focused on some things like, are we diversifying our revenue streams such that we're taking advantage of some of these new opportunities that are being presented by digitalization and decentralization. I'm looking at, are we diversifying our services and products such that I am not such a slave to the old paradigm of kilowatt hour sales as my only revenue driver? And then finally, because I'm from California and because we're very proud of our environmental leadership, it really is this effort lowering the carbon footprint of SMUD, our customers, and our region. So those are the longer term barometers of whether we're moving in the right direction for me and for SMUD.
Now, I mean, I think this is all very interesting in terms of, moving forward and how do we really start to realize this vision. And I'm always a fan of, and I think people have seen it here, of sci-fi, dystopias, horror movies, all of that. And I mean, I'm not going to ask you guys, what have been your biggest failures, because I know Jason did that yesterday and everyone just zipped their lips. But I mean, it's I think a question of more around, what are some of the indicators that you're looking out for, to see, maybe you're not heading in the right direction, right? How do you start to course correct and get back to, that path and that vision? I mean, what are some of the things you're keeping an eye out for as you're moving ahead?
I think, for example, when we are, when I mentioned that we're creating digital twins of our customers' energy systems, sometimes you do too much of it, right? If you only need 5 sensors to be able to characterize, you only put 5 sensors, you don't put 50. I think in the beginning, we overdid those things, and we learned from those experiences. And also, it's in the end, what does the customer value? Not just engineers wanting to, and data scientists wanted to do analytics for analytics' sake. And so, those are the kind of things that tweaking that has to happen very fast on an iterative basis at NIPA. And there are things that are not yet, commercial, but promising. For example, we're testing wearables, right? For our craft workforce. If their body temperature is too high, the foreman can say, you need to drink water and rest. Or if they're wearing a pacemaker and they can't be close to a device with magnetic field, that they can get alarmed before they get closer to those kind of movements. So we're testing those things. We're testing augmented reality. So, there's somebody helping a mechanic, for example, assemble or disassemble a pump, using a Google Glass type application. So we're trying to, testing things, not sure whether they're going to be helpful in the future, but some of them are very promising.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like having that testing environment and that ability to experiment. Joe, how about you?
That's such an insightful question. You scared me with the horror movie thing. What's going to happen to us up here?
That's been like a horror movie.
We'd rather be standing up so we can get off the stage quickly. Just this week was in one of our power plants talking with an operator, plant operator, control room operator, who's got maybe 40 years of experience. And behind us was the old, built in the mid-'80s, some of the analog controls. And in front of us was the digital screens. And the question was, how do you like the transition over time? And what he really talked about was you still go back to the old things because you had a routine, you learned how to scan what you knew you needed to pay attention to. And the digital is great as long as we train people properly. And that's the nugget I think is so important, that we don't leave people behind as we digitize the work. And a lot of times that's what happens. The skill level that's required to operate in an information age with a lot more data coming at you and a lot more opportunities to act differently because of the data leaves people behind. But we like to define the digital journey as making the job safer, making it easier for our people to serve the people we're obligated to serve. So keeping people at the center of that is key. And then the other piece of it is really the same for the customers. You can see your communities potentially having people left behind who don't have the capability. And as a utility, we're obligated and we want to serve everybody the way they want to be served. So we got to be careful. We don't pick a solution that works for the early adopters and the innovators and leaves others behind, and keep people at the center of what we're doing, which is why we go back to that whole customer satisfaction, affordability, safety, and the culture that's all about continuous improvement, serving our people, our communities. That's not a trivial thing to do, to translate the investments into those results. That's a big part of how we deploy change management processes. Change management as you deploy new technology is a key for us, not just for our users, but for the people who interact with us. So that's a big part of it. And then the other, the third piece is really the workforce of the future. We've got to aim for where we're going to be, and we have a tendency in this industry to replace like for like as we move forward. So we're building talent strategies that are really 5 to 10 years out, because if you look in the marketplace today, you're likely not going to find the skills you need for the kind of world that we're evolving toward. And I think we have an obligation to interact with the trade schools, the unions who help develop people, and the colleges across, even at the high school level, an opportunity to bring people into this era in a way that's impactful and valuable and gives them productive lifelong work opportunities.
So I was picturing the zombie apocalypse, so figure I just got to run faster than a couple of other people and I'm safe, which is kind of my experience right now as the CEO. But I would say, in knowing whether you're headed down the right path, for us, it's focusing on some of those key metrics. You've got to keep it simple. You've got to be able to explain it to your people. I think you've heard all three of us talk about the importance of culture. And I got to say, all of your investments in digital strategies, systems, really don't mean crap if you don't have the right culture in place to take advantage of it. And so I've spent most of my time, or a big chunk of my time, really focused on, shifting culture. And I have to say, it's not for the faint of heart, and it takes a lot of work to make a change, especially in an industry that has, been around for more than 100 years. In our case, an organization that's been around for 70 years. And, it's tried and true. And there's a saying at SMUD when I first became CEO was, well, it's the SMUD way, which meant you never tried anything new. So I spent a lot of time focusing on how do you create a culture that's more collaborative, more agile, more willing to take risks and fail, and more entrepreneurial. And to me, that has got to be kind of the crucial, are we going to be successful as utilities going forward, or are we going to get kind of pushed to the side? So in addition to those metrics, really focusing on your people, I think, is the most important. And you do need new skill sets going forward. So like you, we've mapped what those future skill sets are, and not surprising, we need people who are data scientists and have a lot of experience in game theory, and are social media experts, and understand design thinking. And that's something that utilities haven't had to acquire that talent before. And those are, across industries, highly sought skill sets. So part of it is, how do you make utilities, I know this is an oxymoron, sexy, so that employees want to come and work for us? Because our reputation is not so sexy, even though we know it is very sexy.
And I think you have to embrace, sometimes you stumble on things. When we went to Puerto Rico, we stumbled on an app on an iPhone, where you can take a picture, it shows the terrain and the GPS coordinates. And it was so helpful in doing damage assessments for the distribution system. And we stumbled on it, we kind of tweaked it a little bit, and then it was used by all of the utility mutual aid. Drones, we really didn't think it was going to be valuable. It was so valuable to have, and basic drones. Utilities, we tend to go right away to the most complicated things. We've been testing 6 drones that can inspect the transmission line, and it can measure everything as an X-ray and this and that, infrared, very heavy, and we're testing it. We're continuing to test, and probably we'll use them in the future instead of helicopters. But the basic drone was very helpful in doing damage assessment during a severe weather event. So now at NIPA, we are, like I said, we got to train at least 50 drone pilots. So as we speak today, we are training 50 drone pilots so that if there are severe weather events in New York, we could be of assistance in doing damage assessment. So you have to embrace those things also that you stumble along the way that you weren't really planning for.
Yeah, I like that idea of stumbling a little bit, but you still maybe get away from the zombies, and everyone survives. So, no, that's great. And now we've talked a little bit about the customer. I know, Erin, you have some questions you want to ask about the customer side.
So we've been hearing a lot about customers pretty much all week, and all 3 of you definitely seem invested in the customers. And so, Gil, you mentioned not wanting to have the haves and have-nots in energy, and so. What does digitalization mean for those more underserved communities, or does digitalization mean the same thing to every customer, and what sort of factors do you consider when thinking about those more underserved communities?
Well, I think I start with the premise that utilities really should find a way to increase the capacity utilization of our infrastructure. If you look at airlines, right, prior to deregulation of airlines, the capacity factor of airplanes was 40%. Now, after deregulation, it's 90+% capacity utilization of airlines. So we need to think of ways using technology and maybe pricing and other tools to increase the capacity utilization of our grid. In New York, the capacity utilization is 54% because the system was designed to meet the hottest of the hottest days in July and August, probably 100 hours, right? And you build the system to meet those 100 hours. Most of the time, it's barely used. So we need to figure out, with batteries and other types of technologies, because I think that's what's going to lower the cost overall as we go through this transformation. But I'm sure NiSource, SMUD, and NIPA and other utilities, we're trying to figure out how to address what we call the LMI market, right? Low income, middle income customers. So we do it through community solar, different approaches for different states. I think we're trying different things, but it has to be something that we need to address.
So I'll just say, when I think about our customers, we need to kind of embrace the uniqueness of our customers and meet them where they are rather than where we want them to be or whether we think they should be. And I think your low-income customers are a perfect example of that. And technology has really enabled us to learn a lot more about those customers and identify them. Smart meters tells you a whole lot. We buy psychographic and demographic information to better understand our customers. But we really are very, very focused on, in the last couple of years, is really moving the dial on poverty in the Sacramento region. We have about 20% of our customers who are on our low-income assistance program. One of the first things we did was revisit how we did low-income rates. We had kind of a one-size-fits-all. If you were 200% below or above the poverty level, you essentially got the same discount. There's a big difference between somebody who's at that 50% of the poverty level and somebody who's 200% of the poverty level. So we tiered the discounts on our rates to make sure that we're providing the most benefit to those most in need. But it's not about, rates are really just a Band-Aid. They don't get to some of the core problems. So you're never gonna build a sustainable family if all you do is give them a rate discount. So we've really packaged that in a very holistic way with all of our programs around energy efficiency, deep retrofits, weatherization. We've also importantly looked for partners in the community to help us take that journey with our customers. So we're partnering with affordable housing folks, with healthcare organizations. So you start to see this population, these families as individuals, and you start to understand how it's all interrelated. And if we can help here and we can partner with folks in affordable housing and with healthcare and with transportation, you really can help lift a community, a neighborhood out of poverty. So it really is taking that 360 look at our low-income customers, and we're seeing it pay off, quite frankly. And it's, you know, it's fairly new. It's been a concerted effort for about 18 months, but we've made really good progress dealing with probably a good 20 to 30,000 of those customers.
Almost verbatim to what Arlen's saying, when you apply the platinum rule, serve the customer the way they want to be served, digitalization may or may not matter. So we shouldn't presume. There's almost a premise to the question that someone gets left behind, but it may or may not matter. Each customer has a unique desire to interact with us. So we need to be careful about maintaining multi-channel, let them interact with us the way they want to interact with us, if that's telephone. We even have walk-in offices in some of our more vulnerable neighborhoods because that's the traditional way of interacting with us, and that's what serves that community best. So I think we've got to be careful that we don't lose sight of, you know, we serve every segment of the communities that we're privileged to serve, and meeting them where they are in the same way that you just described is critical for us. I would give one example though, because this theme kind of ties to what we're doing at NiSource around diversity and inclusion as well, where we're trying to make sure that our employees are aware of the cultural norms of certain parts of our communities and meet them in a way that's culturally sensitive. And technology can play a role there. We had one example of a customer, we needed to get into their premises. This is on the gas side of the business, where you often need to go inside the premise to inspect facilities, and we needed to get in. And we went to the property a number of times. We could see somebody was home, but they wouldn't answer the door. And here it was someone from whose culture to have a man in the house without the man of the house in the home was just didn't do that. So they wouldn't answer the door. And we could have in our CRM systems knowledge of that, and we could have interacted with them the first time the way they want to be interacted with. To me, that's another layer of the digital strategy where you build holistic information about the premise, the customer, the history, everything we need to know to be best able to serve them the way they want to be served. And we don't often talk about that side of it in the industry, but that's moving to the forefront. And that helps our employees feel better about interacting with customers in a way that's culturally sensitive and appropriate for them. So a lot of good value there and a lot of good opportunity and a key to the next part of the journey for us.
I think that's something we've seen a lot at this event is that conversation of, I mean, Paula, you mentioned the movement from just, you know, talking about you customers as ratepayers to, you know, starting to look at different segments of your customers, and then, you know, really almost getting on this one, you know, looking at each customer as an individual. You know, and Joe, what you pointed out, I think is an excellent example of that. You know, how can we be putting this information in about those customers and really understand all aspects of their lives and how it influences it. So take some time to post some questions in Slido. We'll use a few minutes at the end to be able to address some of those questions. I know, Erin, you have some questions around smart cities that you had wanted to ask.
Yes, so we did some research at Zpryme around smart cities and found that both cities and utilities are really working on digitalization, but not necessarily together. So how much do you think that they should be working together, and how can they really lay out the vision of a smart city together?
Happy to jump on that first. So we operate across 7 states. Columbus, Ohio is a smart city working with grants. We're one of our gas properties, Columbia Gas of Ohio, is active there. We operate in and around Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in and around Boston. And so we've seen different models of smart cities efforts take off. And often it's sort of a transportation, environment, electrification angle that drives that, electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles. And I think there is a role that we're still evolving into for natural gas as well, to think of the whole energy equation, microgrid, the role for multiple fuel sources, how you can diversify and optimize energy within a smart city is one of the great opportunities. What we've seen so far is great collaboration between the utilities and the cities, especially around communications infrastructure, where there might be an opportunity for shared infrastructure. More of a concept phase than a real deployment phase at this time, but the conversations are evolving in the right direction and moving toward that, which is where it starts.
So I guess I would say that I think it's essential that you do work with cities who are aiming to be smart cities, because you're going to be there's going to be a lot of overlap, and you're going to have a lot of inefficiencies unless you figure out how to coordinate. I think we're relatively fortunate because we're not over 7 states. We have a relatively compact 900 square mile service territory in what is a pretty technologically advanced community, being very close to Silicon Valley. And but not all of our cities are in the same place that we serve. But the primary city, which is the city of Sacramento, and I'll use electric transportation as an example of where this close collaboration is actually panned out. We've been actually promoting electric transportation at SMUD since the early 1990s, which is, I think we're one of the first, if not the first utility in the country to work on it. Now, we did have an immediate failure because we rolled out a 3-wheel electric vehicle back in the 90s and thought, hey, we're gonna let our customers borrow it so that they love electric vehicles. Worked out really well until our customers discovered these electric vehicles rolled over whenever you went around a sharp turn. So, but nonetheless, we haven't given up on electric transportation. But Sacramento was recently designated as a green city by Electrify America, which is Volkswagen, as a result of their settlement over the diesel. And that is providing an infusion of $44 million over 30 months to support electric transportation. Well, there was a competition for that, and essentially because of our experience in electric transportation, we partnered with the city of Sacramento, and we probably wrote 90% of the proposal. And the city now has a long-range electric transportation plan, which we probably wrote 90% of it, to create that alignment, because after all, we're becoming the fuel provider. We're the new gas station of the future. So how does that work? Location is important. You don't want to put a bunch of DC fast chargers in an area where you're suddenly going to have to build a substation. So, collaborating on what locations make sense. We're installing DC fast chargers in the city and the other communities to kind of deal with that range anxiety. But it's a good example of where the collaboration has, I think, really paid off. And there's certainly other areas when you think about digitalization when it comes to things like community solar, rooftop solar, storage, where that's going to be important going forward.
So I was fortunate to work for Mayor Bloomberg in early 2000, and he's very much into technology. Right off the bat, when he became mayor in 2001, he created a 311 where citizens can call. It's like a customer service. And he created metrics for each of the departments so they can track if somebody reported we have potholes in front of our streets, from the call to the time Department of Transportation fixed it. And he would see those scorecards for each. So if you're a commissioner, you're always like wondering, oh my God, my scorecard. So The other thing was he put GPS in all of the trash and snow plows. So you can, and then you can just go to an app and you can see how many times your street has been plowed if there's a snowstorm. So this are, very early, prior to smart city being a term coined, been involved in it. Now, at NYPA, one of the things that we're doing now is replacing all of the street lights and parking lights across the state, about 500,000 of this, to smart LED. And so we're testing different applications, not just putting LED, but adding sensors like measuring air quality, traffic flow, security cameras, etc., to help the cities, to help the various departments of cities operate more effectively and efficiently. So we'll figure out, we're trying different things for different cities and see what's going to work the best.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like, streetlights, the transportation piece, communications, all those different areas, like you talked about. I mean, there's such overlap that, it'd be a ways to have sort of duplicative efforts going on. So, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, we're seeing, LED lighting with embedded 5G.
Yeah.
Right? So different things we're testing different things out to see what's really going to work.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so we have just a couple of minutes left here. Do we have any questions come in via Slido? Yeah.
As we digitize, we naturally need less employees. How are you communicating with stakeholders about business models that require significantly less labor?
Did you guys hear that, the whole question? Okay, just want to make sure.
I don't necessarily believe that it's less. We have conversations with our union employees right now. The mix will change. We'll require less mechanics and electricians and more technicians, right? So those are that shift is going to happen, and we're starting to have those conversations and introducing formal training in our company.
Yeah, I would say I also don't necessarily agree that that's a foregone conclusion. And again, I think it's different skill sets you may need. I mean, I'm still going to need linemen. That's not going to change. That's the backbone of what we do. But my call center reps, I may need less of them going forward if our customers were successful in driving our customers to a lower cost digital channel. But on the other hand, my call center reps are going to handle more difficult questions from customers, and I'm actually going to want them to sell our products and services when they reach out to customers. So it's a different skill set for those folks. And then I think you're going to have different employees around new products and services and your entrepreneurial businesses that are different than a monopoly business. So again, I think it's a shift, not a reduction necessarily.
The heart of that goes back to, you could debate more or less, but it's the work is changing. And that's really what people are experiencing, not so much about the certainty that the work I'm doing today is going to be the same work 10 years from now or even 5. And it goes back to that need for a longer-term talent strategy, to really aim for where are we going to be in 5 years, and how do we give the people that are with us today the opportunity to see that and to move in that direction, to provide skills, training along the way, and clarity about the view we see for the future. So I think that transition is critical. And if you do that well, and you have a pretty clear picture of where you might be in 5 years, if it's a smaller workforce, attrition can help you move there versus disruptive changes in your workforce. But that takes a lot of leadership insight, a lot of work at the leadership level to build that vision and to execute against it. And it's not traditionally what the industry has done because things haven't changed as rapidly. So I think it's a new demand on leadership, and in a sense, it's an exciting opportunity to create the future.
Excellent. And just to wrap things up, I mean, if you were in a couple words describe what we should be looking out for over the next year, that maybe the industry isn't looking at enough, what would you say?
Not that we're not looking at it enough, but we have to look at it all the time, is cybersecurity. Mm-hmm. That's what kind of keeps me up at night when we do this digitization. You have to think about cybersecurity every step of the way, and always.
Excellent. Arlen.
So I guess I would keep an eye on those technologies that aren't fully baked yet, and look at the applicability of what they're going to do, how they're going to play in our industry going forward. You know, everybody's read a lot about blockchain and Bitcoin, but that blockchain, which is still pretty immature, and I think that you're going to see it dip and go, because I think there's going to be some problems with it before they bake it in fully. But that absolutely plays into a more digitalized, decentralized energy future for customers. And so you have to be keeping your eyes on things that are on the horizon and start thinking about them now. Now, it may not be blockchain 5 years from now that's creating that transactional grid, or 10 years from now. It could be something else, but you better have your eye on it, and then you better be looking at what the next thing is also.
Yeah, definitely.
I'll zoom into the gas side of the business for this particular question, because I think there's two things that are maybe not a year, but you know, the future here. And one is on the asset integrity side. The natural gas system, you can't see it, so you can't inspect it, and we could benefit from predictive analytics, AI around the state of the system, data around soil condition, things that rainfall, a lot of things that affect the ultimate asset integrity. And AI can help us do a better job of predictive modeling of where we should be investing for replacement, for inspection, for maintenance. Because today you dig it up and you look at it and you replace it or you repair it. So it's very labor intensive. So there's an opportunity there. And at the other end, in the emergency response, think about the field workforce in a natural gas business as emergency responders. When there's an odor of gas call, you don't really know what you're walking into until you're there. And if technology can help do remote reconnaissance, remote assessment of the environment before we ever send humans in, and to help evacuate any humans are in that perimeter, that's a huge benefit to the whole industry, to be able to deploy technology to make the work safer and the assets safer. And that's where I think we'll see us going.
All excellent advice. So thank you so much, gentlemen, for taking the time.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it.